Three more commitments are in for Boston College after week 2 of official visit season. Gotta say, this weekend feels a lot better than last.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I am AJ Black, editor of Eagle Insider, part of the 247 network. I've been covering Boston College for over a decade. I've been doing this podcast for over 5, and I am glad you are here to talk BC athletics. So on today's show, we're going to talk about the most valuable transfer. There was an interesting article on CBS Sports, and I want to talk about who they picked and why I disagree with them. 2, the settlement, the House settlement is in, what this means for BC. I'll get into some of the details and what I think this could imply for what BC athletics, where they'll be going in the future. And the second official visit weekend is over. 3 commitments are in. I'm going to have all the details on that. Strap in. We got a big episode ahead of us. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins on FanDuel. Now, all right, first official visit weekend. I think a lot of folks would say, and I don't disagree with them at all, it was a bit of a disappointment. You had, over a dozen recruits and you ended up with a goose egg. Week 2, completely different story. You have to feel better about where things are at now. You had another dozen. You have 3 commitments as of the time of this recording. Things could still change. We only can talk about one of those commitments right now. The other 2 are silence. And I know some of you guys go crazy about that, but they are committed. They're just waiting to do their announcement, their, video or whatever they're going to create, the graphics. So those 2 we're going to have to wait for. But the one we do know is on the defensive side of the ball. Dajon Green, a 6-foot safety out of Octa, Oklahoma. Now, this is our second defensive back BC has landed. They also have Gerald Green Jr., not the basketball player's son, out of More Catholic in New York. So this is number 2 for them. Now, you got to feel good about this one. This is a kid from Oklahoma. The recruitment started with the older members of the staff, Ray Brown, but it really was solidified by Corey Robinson, the new defensive backs coach. Now, many folks don't know much about Corey Robinson. He's, I think he's the latest staff addition, but this was his first, I think it's his first commitment that he's landed. So this is a big deal for him. He's coming from the NFL back to the college ranks where he has experience to get a guy like Green, who is a safety. I think this was a good one. And honestly, I think you could have maybe one more defensive back and that'll be done. Because your depth, man, you want to talk about depth. Adding Green to a room that had 9 commitments last year really solidifies, the depth that Bill O'Brien is building at this position. He has guys that are ready to play already. TJ Green, Ashton Cunningham, Najee Sinclair. We already watched some of these guys that are only true freshmen. They're ready to play, and you're bringing in some more talent. You're starting to feel that secondary is really good. But who is Dajon Green, right? This was a kid who had 3 interceptions last year, about 55 tackles, a couple of 8 or 9, over a dozen pass defenses, and got the attention of some other schools. He was going to be taking a second official visit to Iowa State, so he checks that box of a recruit that has power for interest. He just loved BC. I talked to him about it, and the official visit was what sealed the deal. Now, there's 2 more official visitors, that committed as well. And everyone wants to know, who is it? When we're going to find out. You're going to find these ones will not, I can, because I've talked to both of them. These both will not, you're only going to have to wait a week or so for both. I think one of them will probably come out when you're listening to this. So there's a little hint for you right there. But what I want to say is, I think everyone's waiting on the big names, right? Kai Pritchard, Marky Walbridge. You want to know what's going on with these two. And I can tell you they're not the two that committed. There would be a much bigger deal about this, I'm sure, by BC's staff online if either of those guys committed. Because Marky and Kai, Marky's an offensive lineman from Massachusetts. He's one of the best in the state and has big time blood offers. And Kai's a 4-star, top 247. And for both of them, they're going to finish off. I am, from everything I've heard, they're going to finish off their official visits before they make a decision. So you're going to have to wait. You're not going to be able to find out about either of them. But if you go to Eagle Insider, if you go to my site and you look at the official visit list, you can see that whoever that even if I can't give you who they are, they're talented. Everyone that BC is going after has offers elsewhere, like in this group that's coming for official visits. Like every single one of them, whether it's a Jordan Rodriguez, who was just a late offer from St. Peter's Prep, a school I know a lot of BC fans are big fans of. He's supposed to be taking an official visit to Duke, and he had other offers. I think Syracuse and Rutgers were looking at him. So like even like the guys that are names that you may not know as well, they are still getting those offers, and they're still highly rated and highly ranked. Like the average rating of some of these guys is higher than what Jeff Hafley has. I have to say, the guys that Jeff Hafley went after, it's a different beast for BC. Bill O'Brien's recruiting teeth are showing now. He's able to get. He's starting to with just one season of going 7-6, which is, par for the course for BC. He's been able to get, recruiting to take that next step. Now, Dajon Green may not be the biggest name that you've heard in this class, but he was the highest defensive back that BC had been looking at. He was someone that they had targeted and they really, really wanted, and they've been looking at him for a long time. So regardless of what the ranking is, if you trust what Bill O'Brien and his staff are doing and their ability to evaluate talent, then you know that Dajon Green's going to be something, that he's going to be a valuable asset to that secondary in 2 or 3 years. And I think like you had Ray Brown look at him. He thought he was a big deal. You had Bill O'Brien and his staff look at him. You had Corey Robinson, who's an NFL coach, come in and seal the deal. All these guys looked at Dajon Green and thought, this is a guy that's going to really improve our program. And they went in, they brought him in for an official visit, and they landed him. Good news there. We'll have more recruiting reaction later this week when more news breaks, and I'm sure we'll be able to talk about who those other silent commitments are in a moment. Let's switch it a little bit. The House settlement is in. Everyone wants to know, how is this going to impact Boston College? I'll explain where the numbers look like and how things are going to affect Boston College, especially the football program, moving forward. We'll get into that in just a moment. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Are you watching that NBA Finals? The Pacers, I could not believe the shot Tyrese Halliburton hit that other night, like crazy. And if you think you want to ride his momentum, you can go on to FanDuel, find his points, get in on that, and you're going to probably do pretty well with yourself. If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook betting partner of the NBA. Hello and welcome back. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black. And everydayers out there that are listening to this podcast have heard me talk about this house settlement and how impactful this was going to be to college athletics when it finally went through. And talk about Friday evening news dump. The judge finally signed off on the House settlement, putting it into action starting, I think the NIL deal starting immediately, but everything else starting July 1st. So I've gotten a million questions, a million people asking me about this. How is this going to impact Boston College? There's a bunch of different things here. So let's go through them piece by piece. The biggest piece that everyone's talking about is revenue sharing, right? $20.5 million that each school, up to $20.5 million that each school can spend to pay their athletes. And the way that they agreed upon it, I believe football gets 70% of the $20.5 million for each program. That's how it's going to be divvied up. And I believe men's basketball gets like 15% or 10%, and then it goes down from there. And then the Olympic sports really get screwed in a lot of this. It doesn't look good for them. But this is talk. Football's king. Football brings in all the money, so it's not a big surprise that that's there. So if it was for BC, I've seen a lot of numbers thrown around. I throw BC is not talking about it, so they're not going to tell me like, "Hey, AJ, this is the number we're going to be using." They don't do that. That's not how they work. We'll hear pieces of it from Bill O'Brien and on the John Meter Perel uh, podcast that he does, but the number that I keep coming to is it sounds like 13.5 million is like the average number that they're looking at for schools to spend on revenue sharing for football. So $13.5 million spread apart across your program. I don't know how that money is going to be spread, and that's going to be something they're going to have to figure out. Like, does Grayson James make the same amount of money as the backup kicker? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. And so that's going to be something that they're going to have to battle out and figure out, does each player make the same amount? Do you make it equitable, or do you use it to entice and keep players here that are performing well? Like, you would hope that if you had a revenue sharing a couple of years ago, like you give a big chunk of that to Zay Flowers because he's really good and not just, somebody who ended up transferring like a year later. You know what I mean? Like you want to. I would assume that they're going to try to do this with like tiering it up. I've heard pieces of that, but I haven't really heard a lot about that. So I think that's important to know. The other piece with this is that outside NIL endorsement deals are still on the table. They're going to still have, you can still supplement all this. These college kids are going to, gone are going to be the days of these kids starving because their meal plan ran out. Like, they're going to be, some of these schools are going to have kids raking it in even more so than they are now, because those NIL deals will still be there. Now, the caveat with all this is that any deal over $600 is going to be monitored by Delotti, I think it's called. They're like a consulting firm. So have fun figuring out where this is going to go to, because like it's all about fair market and positional players that are around the same. So they're going to try to make sure that there's no deals that are just dumping cash bags on players to get them to go there. The number that I've heard was like, was it 70 to 80% of all NIL deals would have been rejected by them. So that could be interesting. And I'm also interested in, this is more like talking down the future, like with revenue sharing, are these people going to get tapped out now with just throwing money at athletes? Like, I get there's uber rich people out there that can do this kind of stuff, but the collectives and things like that, which are still going to exist, Friends of the Heights will still be there. Those people that have been trying to keep this thing going, are they going to see that, hey, there's revenue sharing now and they're going to bail? That's something to talk about, and something that we may see down the road. Maybe the love of college football is just going to make sure that never happens. So that is something to watch for. The other piece of all of this is the roster sizes. Now, everyone has been asking, is this 105? That's what the football roster size is going to change to. Is that going to go into effect this year? And the judge, and credit to her, because this was, I think she nailed this. Like, you can't like just give recruits a promise that you're going to have this like 4-year scholarship, and then because of this court ruling, just rip it out from under them. So she did what she said she was going to do, which is basically these players are all grandfathered in. So basically, treat it like a COVID year. Like, they're going to get back to 105, but it's going to take, these guys leaving and going away for them to get there. So they're not going to have, BC will not have to make cuts. They're not going to have to get rid of the walk-ons, which Bill O'Brien has really, trumpeted, and rightfully so. They're an incredibly important part of this program. Those guys won't have to go away. So that, the staff, there was staffs. Like, you look at like West Virginia. West Virginia was trying to get out in front of this, and they just started dumping players left and right. BC did the other, where they were like, we're going to wait to see how the cards are dealt, and then we'll make our move. And I think BC made the right move. Now, the interesting piece with this is the West Virginia is there's language in this settlement that helps them get out of that hole if they wanted to. I don't know how any of that's going to work, though. So BC, the football scholarships go up. It's the roster spots, though, it goes down, right? Does that make sense? Like, right now you have 85 scholarships. Well, a week ago you had 85 scholarships. Now it's up to 105, but that's 105 total. You before had all these, preferred walk-ons, and now those spots are going to be in trouble moving forward. Now, a lot of other positions, schools, excuse me, a lot of other sports at schools are going to also see their scholarships increase as well. For baseball, for instance, it's going to go from up to 34, I believe, for baseball, 15 for men's basketball and women's basketball, and a bunch of other sports. Now, this is the first of what's going to probably be many legal challenges to the amateurism of college sports. And right now, this really is the death knell of the term amateurism, because it's no longer amateurism. This is a business, and it's always been a business. People, the NCAA did a great job of trying to shade that so they didn't have to pay people for it, and they could just keep hoarding all that money. But it's over now. Now the players get the opportunity to earn what they should earn off the sweat off their backs. Now, you may not like it. You may say to yourself, well, they're getting a college education and room and board. But look at those TV contracts. Look at the amount of money that they rake in every year. And they for years, decades, didn't share a dime of that with the guys out there, blowing out their ACLs, suffering, concussions and all this other stuff, and putting in hours and hours and hours and hours of work to do this. That's all changed. And I think that's great. I get for some folks it feels different, but when you turn on your college football game on Saturday, it is going to be a little different, but your team's still there. When you're watching Boston College get out on the field, they're still going to wear their red bandana uniforms once a year. They're going to still play for Boston. Fans are still going to jump up and down for Mr. Brightside. That's still going to be there. But at least now when you watch that, you can now know that at least the money that you're spending is impacting the players themselves and not just being hoarded by universities that are using it at behest of the work of their players. And for that, I think that in itself is better for college sports. Now, things are going to continue to change. I'm sure there's going to be more lawsuits. And the first I've heard is the Olympic sports, because they're going to get hammered by this. Like, the amount of, you're going to see, and we're already starting to see, Olympic sports across the country getting shuttered because schools can't afford them anymore. Now that schools have to pay out the money that they're probably going to use for Olympic sports, you're going to see a lot more of it. And for BC, and I don't know where BC's at, and I'm not going to get yelled. I do not need to get yelled at by Boston College for this, but I'm going to say it anyways. You have 34 sports. That's a lot of money to have to be spread around. And I know that there's outside fundings for some of them. Some of them have private funders or whatever. But this is going to make things tougher for a lot of those sports. And I don't think BC will be excluded from any of that. Now, in our final segment, CBS Sports talked about college football, and they talked about each team's most valuable transfer. I was shocked by BC's choice. I'll explain who they picked, why I don't think I agreed with any of it. I'll get into that in just a moment. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black of Eagle Insider. And for all of you who have made Locked On Boston College your first listen, you are smart folks. We do this 5 days a week. And I apologize, last Friday, I got the stomach bug from my son. I couldn't get out of bed, and I was in no shape to record. I apologize. I said I was doing 5 a week in June, but count that as a sick day. It wasn't me taking a day off. I just could not get out of bed. But I'm back. And for my everydayers, we are getting ready for the 2025 Boston College football season. And CBS Sports is starting to ramp up their summer filler content. But hey, it's conversation starters for a lot of different things. And they talked about the ACC, each team's most impactful transfer and who they think will be the most impactful. And I opened this up and I had a few thoughts of who they would pick for Boston College. You could have gone with Jason Hewlett, the new linebacker. You could have gone with Dylan Lonergan, the quarterback. You could have gone with Rocket Wilkins, the talented wide receiver, or Ty Lockwood, the tight end. And if you picked any of those, you would have been wrong, because that's not who CBS picked. Nope. They picked Tommy Matheson, the offensive lineman from Princeton. Now, their rationale is interesting, and I don't want to jump ahead and say that this won't happen, because I don't think that's fair to him. I just thought it was an interesting choice. They project Tommy to be Tommy Matheson, not Tommy Castellanos. For years, we've been talking about Tommy here, and it was Tommy Castellanos. But Matheson, they're projecting him to be the starting center. Now, I'm a little bit skeptical of that, because you have Dwayne Alec, and I really do think Bill O'Brien thinks he's like the guy to do that. Like, he's going to be the guy to be your center. But I'm also a little bit worried too. Like, I asked Mitch Wolf about this. I said, Tommy Matheson is coming in from Princeton, an FCS school, in the summer, and has to learn a lot for a position that really is kind of like, for many schools, the general of their offensive line, and many times like the lieutenant of their offense. Like, they point out the schemes, they pick out the mics, they adjust scheme, blocking schemes. They do a whole bunch of different things out there. And for a guy to come in the summer, I'm just like, can he do that? And Mitch's response to me was great. He goes, AJ, yeah, I agree with you, but he's from Princeton. So he's smart enough to do this. He can do this. Will he? That'll be interesting. But he's not my pick. If you were to ask me, my most valuable transfer for Boston College, I'm going to go with Jason Hewlett. It's hard to pick right now. Like, again, it's summer discussion. If Dylan Lonergan goes out there and he's the starter day one, he's the pick. Like, you can't pick anyone else if Lonergan's the starter. But I'm going to go under the assumption Grayson James starts. I don't know. I don't know who's starting. I looked at the defense, and I looked at what position BC I thought needed a real boost in. And edge rushers won, and I did not see enough out of any of the edge rushers to make me feel confident to say that, like, next year they're going to be the most impactful. They very much could prove me wrong, but I'm not going to go there. I instead went with Hewlett because I think he's got a huge upside, and putting him out there with Bam Crouch I'm sure he's going to have to battle with Owen McGowan, but they're going to figure out ways to get both of them out there at times. Could make this defense explosive and really change the outcome, the outlook, of where I think this defense could go. This was tough. Honestly, Tommy Matheson probably would have been like 8th on my list. I honestly would. All those guys I listed: Lonergan, Wilkins, Hewlett, Ty Lockwood. These guys, I just feel like probably will be more impactful. But it was an interesting thought, and I just was like, wow, Tommy Matheson, kind of out of left field. Now he hasn't even, as I said, I think he just got on campus. He just graduated like last week. Now he's at BC doing master's work. Obviously, Princeton, bright kid. We'll have to wait to see what he can do. On tomorrow's show, if we have the name of number 2 for the official visits, I'll tell you who that is. I'll give you also a rundown of where the official visitors who came to BC, what happened to them over the weekend, if any are any gone, where do things stand? I'll give you some updates on that as well. Thank you all for listening. Follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. Check me out on TikTok. I'm a TikToker now, and I'm on there at Locked On Boston College. You can find me there. I put clips. I've done a few just like me talking videos. It's kind of fun. It's a good way to find new people to check out our podcast. And check me out on Eagle Insider right now. 60% off a annual subscription. I think we have a ton of good information coming out that you're going to want to know about. Make sure you go and sign up there. My name is AJ. I'll see you all again tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Boston College, your team every day.